I want to start with a scenario today that I think is going to feel pretty uncomfortably familiar to a lot of you listening.
Oh, I'm sure it will.
Yeah, so you have this friend, let's just call him Dave. And Dave has been honestly a total chaos agent for years.
Right.
You know, drinking way too much, making terrible decisions, maybe he's a little toxic in his relationships. But then finally, Dave gets sober. Or, maybe he finds religion or he just gets really into CrossFit.
Whatever the vehicle is, he cleans up his act.
Exactly. He cleans up. And you breathe this huge sigh of relief. You think, great, Dave is back. He's going to be healthy. He's going to be so much easier to be around.
Which is the logical assumption, yeah.
Right. But then the relief just never comes because Dave doesn't just get sober. He becomes like the supreme high chancellor of sobriety.
Yeah, we all know that guy.
Suddenly, you're out to dinner, you order a totally normal glass of wine, and you instantly feel this temperature drop at the table.
Yeah.
He's side-eyeing your glass. He's making these little passive-aggressive comments about, poison or his new mental clarity.
And you start to realize that while the substance itself is gone, the underlying personality structure hasn't actually changed at all.
If anything, it's gotten worse. He's rigid, he's deeply judgmental, and frankly, he's just impossible to hang out with now. It feels like he's trying to control the entire room just because he personally can't have a drink.
It's a frustratingly common dynamic. In clinical psychology, we often look at this through the lens of what we call the sober narcissist.
A sober narcissist.
Right, because the addiction wasn't the only problem. It was a symptom of a personality that desperately craves control. So when the drug goes away, that intense need for control has to go somewhere else. And usually, it lands right on you.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today. We've got a massive stack of research here on the intersection of narcissism and recovery. But, and this is where we're going to take a pretty hard left turn for this deep dive, Hers, we aren't just talking about your annoying friend Dave.
No, we are aiming significantly higher than Dave today.
We are taking this modern psychological framework and applying it to one of the absolute heavy hitters in Western history. We're talking about a man whose own personal struggle with, lust and impulse control might actually be the reason you feel guilty about pretty much everything today.
It's a really bold move. We are doing a deep dive into the psychology of St. Augustine.
St. Augustine, the Bishop of Hippo.
We're going to see if the behavior of a 4th century bishop, a guy who literally shaped 1,600 years of theology, actually fits the precise profile of a modern narcissist trying to manage his own addiction.
But before we get to the Roman Empire, I really want to stick with the modern psychology for just a minute, because I think a lot of people just assume that if someone stops doing the bad thing, they're basically cured.
Right, which is a misconception.
Why does the sober narcissist pivot to being so incredibly controlling? Why can't they just say, I can't drink, but you go ahead?
Well, because that would require a healthy ego. And paradoxically, narcissists have very, very fragile egos. It really comes down to this concept called the locus of control.
Okay, break that down for us.
So, in a healthy recovery, a person says, I have vulnerability. I need to manage my own behavior. They own the problem entirely. So the locus of control is internal.
Like saying, I'm allergic to peanuts, so I just won't eat peanuts. Simple.
Exactly. It's about self-management. But for a narcissist, the locus of control is external. They really struggle to accept that they are the one with the flaw.
So it has to be someone else's fault.
Always. So when they are forced to give up a substance, and it's usually because they've totally hit rock bottom, they don't view it as, I need to stop. They view the substance itself, and anyone around them using it, as a direct personal attack on them.
Wait, hang on. So if I'm just having a beer near them, they don't see that as me enjoying a beverage. They see that as me, attacking them.
In a twisted way, yes.
Yeah.
The clinical sources describe this as externalizing blame. If alcohol is in the house, or if you're just enjoying something they can't have, they interpret that as you being wildly insensitive to their needs.
Wow.
They completely flip the script. It's no longer, I lack self-control. It becomes, you lack respect for me.
That is a wildly convenient pivot because it puts everyone else on the defensive immediately. You're suddenly sitting there apologizing for your own dinner.
And that's the entire goal. It's all about securing the moral high ground. This is crucial to understand. When a narcissist loses their vice, they feel a massive loss of power. They feel vulnerable.
Right.
So to compensate for that, they adopt this intense, holier-than-thou attitude. If they can convince themselves that you are somehow weak or impure for drinking, and they are strong and enlightened for abstaining, they instantly regain that sense of superiority.
So they didn't lose their toy. They threw it away because they are too grown up for it, and you're just a baby for still wanting it.
Precisely. It
Yeah.
literally turns a personal deficit into a shining virtue. And this bleeds right into environmental control. A narcissist needs the environment to perfectly mirror their internal state.
So if they can't have fun, nobody can.
Exactly. If they're deprived, the room must be deprived. If they're anxious, the room has to be anxious. They simply cannot tolerate a world where they are suffering and you are happy.
You know, I've seen this play out where they don't even explicitly say stop. They do I guess the sources call it the okay trap.
Oh, the okay trap is
They
classic.
say, no, no, go ahead, have fun. But the vibe at the table is absolutely lethal.
It really is. The research identifies two main roles they play when they set this trap. First, there's the martyr.
The
They
mark.
just sit there sighing loudly, looking miserable, checking their watch every 5 minutes. They want you to taste the guilt in literally every single sip you take.
And what's the second role?
The superiority complex. This is where they watch you like a hawk. They're silently cataloging every slight slur in your speech, every time you laugh a bit too loud, just to prove to themselves, see, look how sloppy they are. I am so much better than this.
That sounds utterly exhausting to be in their head. But it's also really dangerous for the people around them, isn't it? Because if you're not careful, you start managing their emotions for them.
That is the big safety warning in the psychological research. If you find yourself walking on eggshells or hiding your own completely normal behaviors just to keep them sober, you are in a very toxic, codependent dynamic.
Right, because healthy recovery is about boundaries. Like, I can't be around alcohol, so I will leave early.
Exactly. Narcissistic recovery, on the other hand, is about control. You cannot have alcohol because I am here.
Okay, so we have the psychological profile locked in. The sober narcissist externalizes blame, demands the world change to fit their personal restrictions, and turns their struggle into a universal moral law.
That's the blueprint.
So now let's make the historical jump. We are going way back to the year 400 AD.
To St. Augustine.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second, or I guess saint's advocate. Are we really going to sit here and diagnose a church father, a guy who lived 16 centuries ago, with a modern personality disorder? I mean, isn't that a little unfair? He can't exactly defend himself.
It's a very fair question, and honestly, usually I'd completely agree with you. It's risky to diagnose history.
Mm.
But Augustine is a highly unique case because he gave us all the data himself.
You're talking about confessions.
Yes. He wrote Confessions, which is widely considered the very first Western autobiography. And it's incredibly detailed. He tells us exactly what he did, exactly how he felt about it, and exactly why he changed. We aren't just guessing from fragments. We're analyzing his own comprehensive testimony.
Okay, so what does the testimony actually say? Because I think most people just know him as the very serious guy with the hat in the stained glass window.
Right. Well, before the hat, he was, to use your term, he was Dave.
He was a chaos agent.
He really was. He describes his early life as a life of dissoluteness. He was obsessed with status. He was quite the social climber. But his main addiction, by his own clear admission, was sex.
He was very open about that.
Very. He literally describes himself as being in slavery to lust. He felt he could not stop himself from seeking out sexual partners, even when he knew it was actively damaging his reputation in his career.
So if we translate that to modern clinical terms, we're looking at sex addiction, or at least highly compulsive sexual behavior.
Yes, absolutely. He felt completely out of control. But then he converts to Christianity. And he doesn't just convert normally. He swings to the absolute extreme opposite end of the spectrum. He embraces total asceticism.
We're talking no sex, strict diet, incredibly rigid lifestyle,
Total deprivation.
which honestly, good for him. If that's what he needed to do to get his life together and find peace, that's great. But the argument here is that he didn't stop there.
He absolutely didn't. And this is where we start to see the psychological concept of the Procrustean bed.
I have to say, I love this term. It sounds exactly like a medieval torture device.
Well, in Greek mythology, it basically was. Procrustes was a mythological smith who had this iron bed. If a guest was too short for the bed, he'd stretch them on a rack until they fit.
Yikes.
And if they were too tall, he'd chop off their legs. The whole point of the myth is that the person must be forced to fit the bed. The bed does not adjust to fit the person.
So Augustine builds this rigid bed of strict celibacy and asceticism that works to manage his specific erection, and then he tries to force the rest of humanity to lie in it.
That is exactly what happened. This is the classic pattern of universalizing personal shame.
Right.
A healthy, non-narcissistic approach would be, I, Augustine, have a very high sex drive and poor impulse control. Therefore, I should probably stay celibate to keep my life on track.
Going back to that internal locus of control, I have a problem, I manage it.
Right, but Augustine didn't do that. He looked at his own personal lack of control and concluded that humanity itself was broken. He decided, this isn't just my flaw. This is the human condition.
That just seems like a massive illogical leap. Like, I can't control myself around cake, therefore nobody on Earth can control themselves around cake.
It is a massive leap, but psychologically, it's a highly protective one. And historically, this is exactly how we get the pervasive doctrine of original sin.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying original sin, this fundamental idea that we are all born, damned, and broken from birth, was basically just Augustine projecting his own impulse control issues onto the cosmos? I mean, didn't people believe that before him?
Not really, no. Or at least, certainly not in the totalizing way he framed it. In fact, Augustine had a theological contemporary named Pelagius.
Okay.
And Pelagius looked at the exact same scriptures and said, no, God gave us free will. We can choose to be good or we can choose to be bad. We aren't born fundamentally broken. We're born capable.
See, that sounds just objectively much more reasonable and balanced.
It does. But Augustine absolutely crushed him. He fought Pelagius with everything he had, eventually getting him declared a heretic. Because think about the psychological stakes here.
Yeah.
If Pelagius is right, and humans actually can control themselves.
Then Augustine is just a guy who failed.
Exactly. He's just a guy with a personal problem.
But if Augustine is right, and we're all born totally defective...
Again, Augustine is no longer a failure. He is a tragic victim of a cosmic reality. It's not his fault he couldn't control his lust. It's Adam's fault.
Oh, wow.
It brilliantly shifts the narrative from I have a problem to the entire species has a problem. It is the ultimate externalization of shame.
That is honestly brilliant in a very dark way. It's like the ultimate, it's not me, it's you breakup speech, but he directed it at the entire human race.
And it leads directly into what the sources call his zealot phase, which perfectly mirrors our sober narcissist. Because sex was his specific undoing, he couldn't just view it as a neutral or healthy part of life for anyone else.
Right, because if it's healthy for them, why couldn't he handle it?
Precisely. So it had to be completely rebranded as inherently dangerous. It became venereal, sinful, a source of shame for everyone. If everyone is forced to agree that bodily desire is evil, then Augustine isn't missing out on anything good. He's actually heroically avoiding something bad.
It totally validates his struggle. Because if he's just sitting alone in a monastery cell while everyone else is out having happy, healthy marriages, he might feel like a loser. But if he manages to convince the whole world that marriage is just a lower spiritual state and desire is actual filth, then suddenly he's the winner. He's the elite spiritual athlete.
You hit the nail on the head.
But I really want to dig into how he does this psychologically. Because admitting that you were basically a slave to your impulses usually requires a lot of vulnerability. And narcissists notoriously hate vulnerability. How do you admit you were an addict while still maintaining that you're fundamentally better than everyone else?
That's where a very specific defense mechanism comes in. It's called splitting. For Augustine, he split the self from the body.
Okay, unpack that for us. Because we hear people say things like, my body is a temple or whatever, but this sounds fundamentally different.
It is. In Augustine's writings, you see this very specific, very repetitive type of phrasing. He rarely says, I wanted to have sex. He says things like, my flesh betrayed me. Or he constantly talks about the body as this vile, recalcitrant beast that is actively attacking his spirit.
But isn't that just a literary metaphor? I mean, poets talk like that all the time. My heart betrayed me, my eyes deceived me.
For a poet, yes. For a narcissist, it's often much more than a metaphor. It acts as a profound form of psychological dissociation. By viewing the body as a separate, hostile, alien entity, he completely absolves his true self of any real responsibility.
I see.
The real Augustine, his mind, his soul, that part is perfectly pure and holy. The body, the meat suit, so to speak, that is the saboteur.
So it creates this incredible scenario where he gets to be both the victim and the hero simultaneously. He's the victim of his biological body, but he's the hero for fighting it so bravely.
Exactly. But here is where it gets incredibly toxic for the rest of us. And this ties back to our sober narcissist friend. This is the totalitarian control aspect.
Yeah.
If Augustine views his own body as a literal traitor, how do you think he views your body?
Obviously as a threat.
As a fundamental betrayal of truth.
Yeah.
If he cannot trust his own biology, he certainly is not going to trust yours. This is exactly why the sober narcissist becomes so deeply controlling. They are just projecting their intense internal war onto the external world.
Because your freedom triggers them.
Yeah, they need to suppress your freedom because it constantly reminds them of their own dangerous desires.
It really reframes the whole history of religious repression. It's not just, rules are rules because God said so. It's more like, I'm terrified of what I might do, so I need to put handcuffs on you to feel safe.
That's it in a nutshell.
I want to pivot and talk about the sheer scale of the ego involved here, because to take your own fairly common teenage bad habits and successfully turn them into a theology that dictates human behavior for a millennium and a half that requires some serious grandiosity.
Grandiosity is the absolute hallmark of narcissistic personality structures.
Hmm.
And we see it incredibly clearly in the famous pear story in his Confessions.
Right. I remember reading this in college philosophy class. He basically steals some pears from a neighbor's tree and feeds them to some pigs.
Correct. It's a prank. He's a teenager. He's bored. He's showing off for his friends. It's just petty vandalism. But does Augustine treat it in his writing like a dumb teenage prank?
No, he goes on and on about it for pages.
He analyzes this one minor act of fruit theft as a profound cosmic rebellion against the creator of the universe. He genuinely treats it as the definitive moment he looked into the terrifying abyss of absolute evil.
It's a little much, isn't it? I mean, it's just pears.
To a neurotypical person, yes, it's absurd. But to a narcissist, this is the special sinner complex. A narcissist fundamentally believes that even their sins are exceptionally special.
They can't just be average at anything, even failing.
Exactly. They aren't just a petty thief, they are a metaphysical rebel. There is a deeply rooted arrogance in believing that your minor teenage delinquencies are of deep, personal, agonizing interest to God Almighty.
It's the main character syndrome of theology. Like, God is pausing the universe to watch me steal this fruit and weeping.
And look at the pivot he makes afterward. The sources call this the addict's pivot. Augustine didn't suddenly become a calm, moderate person. He just traded the intense dopamine hit of lust for the dopamine hit of ideological purity.
He found a new drug.
He moves seamlessly from the addict role to the guru role. He gets to be the ultimate authority now. He's still the most special, important person in the room. He just changed the criteria for what makes him special.
But there is a real devastating human cost to this pivot. We've been talking a lot about abstract theology and psychology, but there were actual people in his life who got totally run over by this guru bus. And this is the part of the research that honestly just made me angry. We really need to talk about the woman.
Yes. This is often viewed as the smoking gun regarding his profound lack of empathy. We hear endlessly about Augustine's mother, Monica. She's a saint too. But we rarely, if ever, hear about the woman he actually lived with for 15 years.
15 years? I mean, that's a marriage.
In every single way that matters emotionally, yes, it was. It was a recognized common law marriage. They lived together, they were loyal to each other, and they had a son together, Adeodatus.
So they are a literal family.
They are a family. But she was of a slightly lower social class. And as Augustine's career in rhetoric was really starting to take off, his mother, Monica, decided he needed a proper marriage to a wealthy socialite to advance his political standing. So she actively arranged a new marriage for him with a very young heiress.
Okay, so what did Augustine do? Because this is the man who writes endless, beautiful pages about the nature of love and the soul.
He sent her away.
It's just like that.
He allowed his mother to kick his partner of 15 years out of their house. She was sent all the way back to North Africa. And here is the real kicker: he kept their son.
He separated a mother from her child so he could marry someone richer.
He did. And in Confessions, he does write about this moment. He talks about how his own heart was cut and wounded and how much he bled emotionally from the separation.
Okay, so he felt bad about it.
He felt bad for himself. If you read the text closely with this psychological framework, it is entirely self-referential. He mourns the loss of his habit. He mourns his own pain. He almost never reflects on her actual experience.
He doesn't think about what she's going through.
Not at all. What was it like for her to be completely discarded after giving him the best 15 years of her youth? What was it like to have her child taken from her? He doesn't explore that.
Wait, does he even name her in the book?
No. In all of his voluminous writings, she remains completely nameless.
That is incredibly chilling. That's just a total erasure of a human being.
Clinically, it is the ultimate object view. To a narcissist, other people are ultimately just objects. They are supply. She supplied him with sex and companionship when he was in his lust phase. But when he needed to move to his purity and power phase, she suddenly became an obstacle. So he simply discarded the object. He didn't see her as a fully realized human being with equal autonomy. He saw her as a disposable prop in the epic movie of his own life.
It really puts that sober narcissist concept into such stark relief because we see this exact same behavior today. The guy who gets sober and then suddenly dumps his so-called partying friends or dumps the girlfriend who just doesn't get his new journey.
Right, they frame it as personal growth.
But it's not really about growth, is it? It's about discarding the people who were witnesses to the old self.
Exactly. It's never, we just grew apart. It's always, I am purging myself of my vices, and you, unfortunately, are just one of the vices.
So when we step back and look at this entire historical and psychological picture, we aren't just looking at a revered saint, and we aren't just looking at a recovering addict. We are looking at a brilliant, highly effective defense mechanism that basically conquered the Western world.
That's the synthesis of the deep dive.
Mm.
Augustine took a very real, very personal struggle with addiction and impulse control, and he filtered it through a deep narcissistic need to be special and strictly in control. And the end result was a massive theology that successfully externalized his own shame onto the entire human race.
So the translation is basically, I'm not broken, the world is broken.
And because the world is broken, I must be the one to control it. That is the fundamental shift. The key sign of this dynamic, whether we're talking about Augustine of Hippo or just your friend Dave, is when the narrative moves from, I need to change myself, to the world needs to change to accommodate me.
It really forces you to completely reevaluate how we view moralizing in general. When someone is screaming at you that you are living wrong, that you are undisciplined, that you are impure.
You really have to ask the critical question. Is this actually about virtue? Or is this just someone else's unresolved trauma being projected outward as a rigid rule for me to follow?
That is exactly the thought I want to leave you with today. The next time you feel that deep, almost inherent guilt, that creeping feeling that you are just somehow wrong for having normal human desires, ask yourself, is this actually my own conscience speaking? Or am I just hearing the distant echo of a 4th century narcissist who couldn't handle his own breakup?
It's definitely a question worth asking.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.